So much for coming tonight, and I want to go ahead and hand it off to our ABC team. ABC and Univision team, excuse me.
All right, all right. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us here. Good evening to everyone. Once again, ABC 13 anchor Mayra Moreno. Want to thank everyone for being here today and everyone that's watching online as well. So tonight at the University of Houston downtown, Robertson Auditorium, we are streaming this on abc13.com.
Hello everyone, my name is Osvaldo Corral. I'm news anchor for Channel 45 Univision, and I have a pretty bad news. My accent is this thick, and it's not gonna change in the next hour, so please bear with me, okay? You don't have that trouble when you get your food, you're on your taco truck or whatever. So we are in Texas, bear with me. Univision 45 Houston is offering a simultaneous translation into Spanish over our Facebook page. Tonight we're hosting 3 of the candidates for the Texas Senate District 6. Republican candidate Martha Fierro declined our offer. We will start now, so please welcome Democratic candidates Mia Mundy, State Representative Ana Hernandez, and State Representative Caro Alvarado. Please welcome them to the stage.
And as a reminder, the answers will all be about 1minute 30 seconds in length with a minute rebuttal. We will begin this evening with candidate Mia Mundy. So Mia, for many people, you're a new face. Can you take this time to tell us who you are and why you are qualified to represent State Senate District 6?
Well, I definitely appreciate the question. It's been one that's come up quite a bit with this campaign, and it's definitely a respectable question. So my name is Mia Mundy. I'm originally from Missouri. I moved to Texas from New York City about a decade ago, and I've lived in the district for the last 3 years. As a young girl, I've always fascinated about public service, and I've always given my life spent for giving to others. So there's an aspect where whether it's volunteering with my church, whether it's doing things with my Christian liberal arts school, or just personally, as currently I'm a child advocate and working with foster kids, there's always an aspect that I want to give back. There's always an aspect that I want to increase people's happiness, and I just want to make lives better. So when Governor Abbott put out the call, I said, why not now? And so being a constituent in the district for the last 3 years, there's aspects where I think there's a lot of voices that aren't heard, and there's a lot of voices that don't have a seat at the table. And so I believe what qualifies me as being a constituent is I have one of those voices. There's a lot of things across my intersections that I don't believe are addressed in the district that I want to speak boldly for, and marginalized groups that I don't think are represented well in the district. And so I'm the type of person that you miss all the shots you don't take, so I'm shooting my shot.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, State Representative Caro Alvarado, you are the state representative for Texas 145th House District and serve on the Houston City Council. Why do you believe you are qualified to represent State Senate District 6?
Good evening, and thank you to the university for hosting this. This is in District 145, so we're very pleased to have you. I think my qualifications from being on the Houston City Council and a state legislator qualify me to be a candidate, but also to be the state senator from Senate District 6. I also think about the experiences of growing up in Houston's East End community and tackling issues like air quality and being a young volunteer for Planned Parenthood and an advocate for women's reproductive health. I also think being a product of HISD and knowing the importance of a quality public education and realizing the results that can happen when we put money into educating our kids and investing in our children. It is the most important thing that we can do as elected officials, but as also as community leaders. And I stand ready to take that experience to the Texas State Senate.
Thank you. Now, State Representative Ana Hernandez, if elected, you would be the first former undocumented immigrant to become a member of the state Senate. So what qualifies you to be the first person to achieve this milestone?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. and I am a proud immigrant. And as I was mentioned earlier about the opportunities for interns for students, that's how I started over 20 years ago as an intern in the legislature, and I've been in office elected as a state representative for the last 13 years. And I believe it's those experiences, those life experiences as a legislator for the last 13 years, as an immigrant, as a lawyer, as a mother of a 6-year-old boy, that makes me the best qualified candidate to represent Texas Senate District 6. And I'm proud of the record that we've had in the legislature of serving our community back home, of advocating for them in the legislature to make sure that other families and other students and everyone has the same opportunity that has been afforded to me. As a former undocumented immigrant, I am very grateful for those that fought for me to have an opportunity to stand before you as a lawyer and as a legislator. And I know there are many others that are waiting for that opportunity, many families that are fighting to achieve the American dream. And we want to give them that opportunity, that if they work hard, they can achieve anything they want to. And that is making our community stronger and empowering them through education to make sure that we have strong schools in our neighborhoods, that kids get the tools and schools have the tools that they need to educate our future workforce, that when they graduate, they're able to enter the workforce, and that we have healthy families that have access to quality health care.
Thank you so much.
Well, tonight we're going to have also some questions from UHD students. So we're going to have the first question from our one of the students. Please come up and state your name, and introduce yourself, and present your question.
Hi, my name is Shay Tatum. I'm a graduate student here at the University of Houston downtown, as well as the Speaker of the House for the Student Government Association. So my question for you is, about 10% of the citizens in District 6 attend college right now. How did you have a policy to enact for District 6 that will give more access to higher education to the citizens in your district, in that district?
What's the order?
State Representative Alvarado, would you like to start?
Sure. I currently serve on the Committee of Higher Ed in the Texas Legislature. And during this last budget process, unfortunately, the legislature did not really add more money in for higher ed. And the money is there. I think that if we used, for example, our rainy day fund to offset some of the shortages that we have in funding public education and higher education, also empowering and giving more funds to our community colleges where many of our students start, or our junior colleges, and making sure that they are college ready. We have heard and we've seen situations where kids get to college and they drop out because they're not college ready. So it has to be a comprehensive approach, making sure that we're properly funding our public education. The TEA recently estimated that public funding by the state is going to drop by $3.4 billion. The state of Texas used to fund half of public education, and now it's down to a third. So I think that we need to start there and improve that, and make sure for every budget process we are appropriating more money, and the formulas have to change. For too long, we've seen universities like this one, U of H downtown, who has not gotten its fair share, and I'm ready to go and fight and advocate for that.
Mia Mundy, you can answer the question.
So I appreciate the question. I think what's pivotal in the statement that you made is 10%. So I sit someone as not somebody who has a policy, have already been a process, but I hear 10%, and I completely understand why you're asking the question. And so I think it's a travesty that only 10% of the district is doing as such. And so when I think about that, first I think about access, and I think about equity. And so my first question and foremost would be to focus on, is it equitable across the board? From our charter school standpoint, to our private school standpoint, and even to our public school standpoint. I support the idea of more funding. I think the state needs to do well more than 50%, and I do think we need to invest in junior colleges as well. But I think more than anything, we need to make sure from a foundational level that education is equitable. That number makes me think that that's based on privilege because of the rest of the district makeup. We know it's lower socioeconomic, we know it's high people of color, and so privilege is what founds education at this point, and the state needs to come in and mitigate that privilege so that it's equitable across the board.
Thank you. That was your time.
State Representative Hernandez.
Yes, Thank you so much for that question. I was a student at the University of Texas School of Law in 2003 when tuition deregulation was passed by the state legislature. That following semester, I saw my tuition go up $500. This following semester, another $500. And I know that has continued to increase, making higher education, college, out of reach for many families, many students. And so that is unacceptable, and that's something that the state legislature needs to fix. I mean, we've seen it since 2003, that it's out of reach for many families. We need to increase our Texas grants programs to help these students be able, no one should graduate from college and not be able to find a job that all they do is pay their student loan. I mean, the student debt that college students are graduating with is too high, and we want to make sure that individuals are able to graduate and start their families, buy a home, and not be burdened by the high student debt that they have.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. So this next question is one that many continue to talk about, as we know, and I'll start once again down the line with State Rep Carol Alvarado. How do you plan to strengthen our border security as well as keep criminals out?
Well, I think we have to make sure that we have comprehensive immigration reform, and time again, we've seen that Congress has failed us, and we've seen nothing but tactics of hate and bigotry from President Trump. What we need to do, first of all, in the state of Texas is repeal Senate Bill 4. It was an awful bill, should have never passed, but it is the law. We have seen unfunded mandates to our local municipalities. Every police chief, every major city police chief testified in the committees that this was a bad bill for police officers and for the public. And now we've seen the Attorney General suing cities like San Antonio for not violating constitutional rights. So this coming session, I think we need to make every effort to repeal Senate Bill 4 and to urge Congress to pass a comprehensive immigration reform. We cannot continue to have things happening in our backyard like baby jails. And when they were trying to open the baby jail in my district, I didn't just write a letter, but I demanded that we have a public hearing and have the state of Texas investigate situations where children had died in Dilley, Texas. And because of that, the state of Texas investigated it and is now taking action. And we need a zero-tolerance policy. If a facility doesn't pass a city inspection, they shouldn't be granted the permit by the state.
Thank you so much. That was your time.
Next candidate. You? Yes.
So I think there's so much to this question, and I think as an individual who looks at things from a holistic standpoint and keeps people first, it's important to address it in that manner. And so, for instance, I think what's most important is focusing on legislation and regulation that truly does put people first. So there's an aspect with this situation where there's safety on many sides that are concerned. So we're concerned about the border and individuals getting into this country that can do harm. Individuals trying to get into this country want to do better for themselves and may pose no threat. And so there's an aspect where I think it's very important that we engage from a very human standpoint, that we make it easier to enter this country legally. Things are not kept in the dark if the light is safe. And so if we make it safety, where we do immigration reform and we make it easier to enter this country legally, you don't have everyone in the shadows. You don't have that fear causing more fear. And so there's an aspect where, yes, we need to protect our sanctuary cities, but there's an aspect where we must put humanity at the center of this. And I think that's the issue missing in this. These are people who we need to protect.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
State Representative Hernandez.
As a former undocumented immigrant, we need to stop demonizing immigrants. There are many families that come here just like mine, looking for a better opportunity for their children. And I'm very grateful that my parents made that decision to bring me to this country. And I think that we need to fight those policies, as I have in the Texas legislature, not just in fighting SB 4 on the House floor, but continuing that fight in the court. And as legal counsel for the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, have gone to the federal court and been on the witness stand to give my testimony in making sure that we repeal SB 4, and we will continue that fight. It's also a fight in the budget. The last 2 legislative cycles, there's been $800 million appropriated for border security without any accountability measures. And we know if you drive down to the border, you'll see it's DPS officers traveling back and forth to the border that don't want to be there. We want to, when we're talking about community policing, we want to make sure that those individuals are familiar with the area if we really want to keep our state safe. And so I am against this funding that we've had in the legislature for border security.
Thank you very much. Now we would like to kind of like follow up with this question, so, and we're going to keep it anyway like short on your answers. On this one, do you support the president's plan to build a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border? Yes, no, and why?
Absolutely not. We don't need to build walls. We need to continue to build bridges, bridging our communities together. No, nothing good has come from building a wall, as history tells us. And the idea of building a wall and wanting Mexico to pay for it is absolutely ridiculous. This is nothing but political rhetoric coming from the president, who campaigned on this idea, got elected on this idea, and is governing on this idea. It is something that is unnecessary. It hasn't been proven to work anywhere, and it only continues to divide people and to breed hatred. We see it happening time and time again. We've seen people being attacked with tear gas, and that's because of the talk of a wall. It sets the tone and the environment for divisiveness, for hatred, and for not accepting people from other countries. We've all come here from someplace else, and we need to embrace that. That's what makes this country a great place. People come here for a better life, for an opportunity, and we need to make sure that we uphold that.
Thank you, State Rep. Mia, you're next.
So I do not support the border wall. I think if you have the ability to make a wall, I don't see it any different as a fence. And with either one of those symbols, we need to build a longer table. This country was founded on diversity and inclusion. And so there's an aspect when we are diverse and include, we are truly stronger together. And that is not just a gimmick statement, but we truly are. And so all the wall communicates to me is a defensive, reactive approach to a problem that is human focused. And so we need to be proactive. We need to engage the border in a way that puts people first. We need to find a way to legally bring people over here safely and soundly, and we need to make sure that it's a process that's not cumbersome to them. We need to get back to our values. And so I am adamantly against any kind of border wall in this country.
Thank you. State Rep Hernandez, your turn.
I am against building the wall between Texas and Mexico, or any part of the United States and Mexico. Mexico is our #1 trading partner. Our economy relies on the Mexican economy. We're #1 trading partners. So when we talk about sound bites of building the wall, that's not providing solutions. We need to talk about comprehensive immigration reform and how complex that is. When people talk about get in line, most of them don't know what that line means or how long you have to wait for a visa if you're going to petition for a family member from Mexico. It's over 20 years that you wait for that visa to be available. Work visas, we have the need here. We have workforce needs here. Individuals that just want to work and go back. And not everyone wants to stay. And our economy needs that workforce. And so we need to work on comprehensive immigration reform and economy measures that make sense for our state and for our country, and not talk about rhetoric of building the wall.
Thank you once again to all three of you.
Now we would like to have the question from another student. So, thank you. Introduce yourself and your question.
Good evening. My name is Jason Lilly. I am a student here at University of Houston downtown. The question is kind of a follow-up of what was asked earlier. There's a quarter of the residents in your district, District 6, that live below the poverty line. If elected, what sort of legislation would you pass that'll help to alleviate that problem? Because if they're poor, they're not able to go to college. So how can you solve that problem?
State Rep Alvarado, if you would like to start.
Sure, I think a couple of things. The best thing you can do to lift somebody up is give them a job, or allow them to get the skill sets to earn a job. And what we are seeing is that we have a workforce that is retiring, that is graying, and we don't have adequate skill sets to qualify to take those jobs. So we have to start at a very younger age, not just in the high schools, but in the middle schools, to make sure that children know, students know that they have opportunities if they're not going to a four-year university or getting an associate's degree, that they have an opportunity for a vocational and technical training institute. And making sure that we team up with the private sector to give to allow people to be mentored and internships into those jobs. I think the other thing that we can do to tackle poverty is tackling healthcare, expanding Medicaid. We have so many people that can't afford insurance. I've introduced a bill to allow counties to expand Medicaid that would give 280,000 people in the county here, Harris County, the opportunity to be covered by health insurance. So I think if we tackle it from different ends, making sure that they have the opportunity to get training, to have access to a job, and to be able to afford health care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mundy.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful follow-up on the question. So what's fascinating to me about this is it's below 25% poverty, and obviously the district's been around for a while, so that's been a problem for a while. So when I look at that number, I used to be in that number, and so when I talk about the things I used to pull myself above that number, it was a lot of the resources that I had around me through community and relationships. So things like my church, things like family members or friends, things like community organizations, different mentors. And so there's different things that I went out and found on my own that had I not had the network and the access to, it wouldn't have been so easy. So to answer your question, I would deploy more strategic partnerships. And so I kind of come from two mentalities. Either you do something or you outsource it. So giving more funds to entities like your community centers, your neighborhood centers, to create workshops and different things that can help individuals build that community and resource that not everybody so easily has. And so you have to invest in those aspects in the community so that they can help the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Hernandez.
Thank you very much for your question. And I live the same struggles. As a single working mother, I have to balance taking care of my child's needs and also working to put food on the table. And there are many families in similar situations working 2-3 jobs just to make ends meet. And we want to make sure we give them the tools and have robust workforce programs. And it starts in school. And a couple of sessions ago, we passed HB 5 that help create endorsement tracks in high school. So that when students are graduating from high school, they're prepared to enter the workforce or go on to higher education. I've also authored and passed legislation to help with our veterans transitioning back into civilian life, to help connect them with their special military training, their military occupational specialties with workforce needs, and make sure that those two are connected and they're entering the workforce as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Representative Hernandez, you're going to start with this question. Do you support DACA? Do you support DACA?
Absolutely. So as a former undocumented immigrant, I support DACA and DAPA, and I think we should have a pathway to citizenship. Like I mentioned, my family was in a similar situation, and but for the 1986 Immigration and Reform and Control Act, my family would be in the same limbo, living in the shadows. I mean, I remember as a little girl, my family being in fear of even going to the grocery store because they'd heard that there were immigration officers at the grocery store, asking our only aunt that was a U.S. citizen to go do the grocery shopping for us that week. So there are many families living in fear, and that's just wrong because they have so much to contribute to this country. Like I said, I wouldn't be standing here before you as a lawyer and as a legislator if someone wouldn't have given me and my family that opportunity. I became a resident when I was 9 years old. I became a citizen at 18 and elected as a state representative at 27. And I know there are other families waiting for that opportunity, and we need to continue to push for DACA, for DAPA, and for comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you. Mundy?
So I definitely do support DACA, and I think it's a simple aspect as focusing on the person. And so there's an aspect where making it easier to enter the country solves so many of the things surrounding DACA individuals. And so there's an aspect where they were brought here, they're here, they can be here, but now we're threatening that right. And so there's an aspect where, once again, it comes back to people's safety. I mean, all of us who've gone through any educational aspect know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's like safety is first and foremost. And so making it easier to become a citizen and finding a legal way to do that in a way that's not cumbersome is helpful, and it will make us a better country. And so there's an aspect where fear tactics and scaring and now taking a right that was given, there's nothing compassionate about that, there's nothing human about that, and I just don't see America when I think about things as such.
Thank you.
Thank you.
State Rep Alvarado.
I absolutely support DACA, and we thank President Obama for enacting it. And time again, we've seen others on the other side of the aisle try to undo it, and not only support DACA, but make sure we protect the DREAM Act. Serving on the Higher Ed Committee, I made sure that the bill that was trying to repeal our Texas DREAM Act never saw the light of day. And we have to do everything that we can. And I have confidence, because with the new Congress coming in, I think we're going to see measures to reinforce DACA and to make sure that in Texas, when we go back to session, we're going to have 12 new friends in the Texas House and 2 more in the Senate, that we do everything that we can to maintain the Texas DREAM Act that has given so many students an opportunity.
Thank you once again. All right, we do have a number of students that want to make sure their questions are answered, so we would have another student. Please come down, and don't forget to say your name and state your question.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Carlos Rodriguez, candidate for graduation this December, so I'm really happy about that. I'm a first-generation college student as well, so this is a big deal for my family and myself included. Now, my question involves civility. We have an issue in U.S. politics where we are not civil towards each other, especially across the aisle. My question is, how will you work with your Republican colleagues to ensure that this district gets job done, gets work done?
How about if we start with Mia Mundy?
Thank you so much. I definitely appreciate the question. So I am the type of person that surrounds myself with different thinkers, because different thinkers have made Mia Mundy. And so some of the stance I have on even gun regulation and laws, I wouldn't have had 5 years ago. And so I believe that together, we truly are better. And so there's an aspect where I want to learn from you, and you can learn from me. And there's definitely a give and take aspect, but we need to work together for the greater good. We need to prioritize things based on the state as a whole, and as we engage each district, we need to make sure that we're putting people first. So there's an aspect where I have no problem working with another individual and making sure that we're putting people first, making sure that we're putting all Texans first, making sure that we're making everything equitable in this state and not about privilege. With that being said, representing SD6, I am not going to do anything that would hurt or go against my constituents. So I think there's a balance there. And so I'm going to reach across the aisle and I'm going to work, but I'm going to fight for the district that puts me in place. Thank you.
Thank you. State Rep Hernandez.
Which one?
Hernandez.
Sorry,
Yeah, I said Hernandez.
sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing over on this side. Thank you so much for the question. And I have been in the legislature for 13 years. And in 13 years, Democrats have been the minority. So I have learned to work across the aisle to be able to pass my legislation, about 24 bills over the last 2 sessions. And I have sponsors that are Republicans in the House and sponsors that are Republicans in the Senate. And it's important to find that common ground. I mean, we represent our districts, and we know that you stand by your values and your principles, and you have that bright red line that you will not cross. But there's common ground that you can find and be able to work together and find solutions for issues that affect everyday lives of people, and not focus on those issues where you have differences, but build on that common ground.
Thank you. Now, Representative Alvarado.
Thank you. I think you raise a very good issue, because we are examples to the children. And when we see a lot of discourse happening at the national level, sometimes that does transcend to the local level. But I have a good track record of working across the aisle and serving as a committee of a chair, one committee as one session, and then the same committee 2 sessions in a row. And there aren't a whole lot of Democrats that have committee chairmanship, but I think that's the trust and the confidence that Speaker Strauss put in me to work across the aisle to pass things like grand jury reform, allowing Texas to have a random selection for grand jurors if they are on the grand jury. That was a major piece of criminal justice reform, and being able to work across the aisle to pass that, to pass bills to regulate e-cigarettes, and having Republican sponsors. I think that is a good track record, and we have to work across the aisle because people want us to. They want to see us working together in a bipartisan way, and I think going to the Senate, you have to already have those skills in place and proven leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your graduation, by the way. The next question. More than 80,000 individuals with disabilities live in Texas Senate District 6. How do you plan to address the healthcare needs of District 6 residents? And we can start with Ms. Mundy.
That is a phenomenal question, and so I definitely appreciate the question. That is a large number. So I'm an individual who, and a lot of my responses are coming from personal experience because that's what I have. I'm an individual whose closest relationship I lost about 17 years ago. It was my grandpa. My grandpa did not have vision in one eye, did not have two legs, had dialysis issues, and had a very cumbersome time getting through life towards the end. Now, grandpa died 17 years ago in Missouri, but to be quite honest, I look at our places that we frequent and I look at all the privilege that people who stand like me have. Grandpa wouldn't be doing much better today in Texas. And so there's an aspect where we need to make spaces more friendly for the disabled, as well as we need to invest in that community. I'm the type of person where I don't want to tell you what you need, but I want to get to know you, and I want you to tell me what you need. So the fact that that number still is that high in this district, I don't think that's a voice being heard. And that's one of the voices of why I'm standing up here. And so I want to sit across the table, get to know, work with that community and the people that support that community, make sure we're making laws and bills that keep equity for that community and this state as well.
All right, thank you. State Rep Hernandez.
Thank you. When you look at the Texas budget, about 60% of it goes to health and human services and education. So when we cut, and I shouldn't say we, when they cut, when the majority, the Republicans cut the Texas budget, that comes on the backs of people with the greatest need and our students. And so that shouldn't happen. What should happen is we should be expanding our funding sources, like expanding Medicaid and not rejecting that right now, as the state is doing. Those are dollars that are going to other states that belong here, that the need is here. When you see families, and it's heartbreaking, when you see mothers at the Capitol advocating for their child that has special needs, but the state has cut their funding, and they have nowhere else to go. They're in the hallways. And that, I mean, that is just wrong, that they have nowhere else to go, and the state is also telling them, no, we won't help you. And so I will advocate for more funding and make sure that these families have the resources that they need to just take care of the basic needs of their children.
Thank you very much. State Representative Carol Alvarado.
Texas can't afford to send our tax dollars to other states to improve their health. What about our health? What about Texans? And we are doing that because the leadership in this state has declined to expand Medicaid. I've already filed a bill in the House, House Bill 282, that's permissive. It would allow counties to request waivers from the state to receive Medicaid money. If my bill passed, we would ensure that 280,000 people living in Harris County would be covered. Putting my bill aside, if the state of Texas just accepted to expand Medicaid, we would ensure 1.4 million people. We ought to join other states, neighboring states like Louisiana, Arkansas, North Dakota, and other states that have done so. Louisiana has seen a cost savings of over $300 million, and their uninsured rate has dropped from over 10% to 8%, mainly because of expanding Medicaid.
Thank you, State Rep. That was your time. Thank you.
Mayra, I would like to have another student to make a question. Do we have another student? All right, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Benitez. I am a
Don't be afraid to get the mic closer to you if you can. Thank you.
not the tallest around. So I currently live in District 6. I am a student here at the University of Houston downtown. Over 30% of the population in District 6 is not currently, what do you say, not citizens or residents of the United States. what are some policies and your thoughts on immigration policies that have been going around by our president?
State Representative Carol Alvarado, would you like to start?
Well, if we weren't televising live, I'd have a pretty few choice words, colorful words, but I think they're awful. I think that that they are overreaching and that they are extremely divisive. I think the recent elections in November, earlier this month, or last month rather, proved that people want something different. And it also showed in Texas. If you look at our lieutenant governor, won by a narrow margin. And that's a message that Texans are paying attention. We want business as usual to stop in Austin. We don't want SB4s. We don't want bills and pieces of legislation that spew out hate, whether it's bathroom bills or it's anti-immigrant bills. People want us to focus on funding our public schools, improving our air quality, making sure we have infrastructure to deal with flood mitigation. So I'm looking forward to next session because I think we're going to have a lot of help. And with individuals like yourself, I think you are empowered to come to Austin and let those issues be voiced out by you. Thank you.
Thank you.
State Representative Hernandez.
Thank you very much for your question. Now say, I am the people that I want to represent in Senate District 6 as a former undocumented immigrant. And as President Trump has said that Mexico only sends their worst, their criminals, their rapists. That's not true. We stand here, before you as a legislator, as a lawyer, and many other young individuals that are coming to wanting to make our country a better place. And it's our job, those of us that can vote, to make sure we exercise that vote and that we put people in place that represent our values. And if you're undocumented and you can't vote, you have friends, you have family members. I know there are many families where some individuals are undocumented, others are U.S. citizens and can vote. And I urge them to be the voice for the entire family. They're depending on you to be their voice. I am your voice as a former undocumented immigrant to express that we are not rapists and criminals. We are individuals that want to work hard to achieve the American dream and give back to our country.
Thank you. Maya?
So one of my Facebook favorite memes is, they're coming to take our jobs, but they send rapists and criminals. And then the comment is, what do y'all do for a living? So there's an aspect where I don't like any of the rhetoric surrounding. I don't like the demonization of any of it. And the other aspect that I don't care for is the hate that comes from it. But more than anything, it goes back to that safety. It goes back to that belonging. There's an aspect that if we're easier to become a citizen or a less cumbersome way to engage immigration in this country, not only would that number not be that high, but you wouldn't have so many people hiding in shadows and you wouldn't have people so scared. And so from a compassionate, holistic person viewpoint, we need to engage and make sure that they have the support they need to come out and to enter this country legally, and to those who are living here go through a process to become citizens. There's not equity there. So even in citizenship, we have a lack of equity. Once again, it's important that we mitigate and we make regulation that brings equity to all across the board, and this is another voice that's not being heard in this district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Our next question. According to Texas.gov, Harris County is home to approximately 24,000 veterans. What is your plan to make sure our veterans are employed, not living on the streets, and receiving appropriate health care they deserve? Would you like to start, Mindy?
I love this question. And so I, by trade, am an executive search consultant. That's a really fancy word for headhunter. And so what I love about this question so much is some of the people that I place at top 500, 100 companies, so forth and so forth, not only in Texas but across the country, are veterans. There's an aspect when you're taking somebody through the candidate search, that soft skills that veterans bring to the table out the gate that can be transferable. So I work in a career where it's my job to transfer those skills, to put them in a certain place, and I only place people in strategic roles who are going to impact bottom lines and future success. And so I think we need more strategic innovation partnerships here. We need more working with businesses. We need more funding of aspects to kind of walk them through the process of learning how to transfer their skills if you're not going to work with a partner who can. Veterans have a skill set that is immensely needed in the workforce, and being somebody who places them there personally, day in and day out, it's not a hard process, but they need the tools and resources to be able to do that for themselves if they aren't going to be walking in a community that can do that for them. And so we need to walk alongside them and ensure that their equity and the job force is leveled and there. They have the skill set, but a lot of them don't know how to communicate it into the workforce. And we need to make sure we're doing that alongside them. Thank you.
So Representative Hernandez?
I'm proud of the record that we have in working with veterans. A couple sessions ago, I authored and passed legislation creating the Texas Women Veterans Program. And it's one of the few programs in the country, and this is creating a state agency for women veterans. We have one of the highest veteran populations in Texas, about 190,000 female veterans. And this program works with the female veterans in outreach and making sure that they're accessing their benefits for education, for housing, other benefits that they have earned by serving our country. I've also authored and passed legislation to help in that transition when the veterans return, that we are connecting their military occupation specialties with the top workforce needs identified by the Texas Workforce Commission to connect those two and make sure that they're entering the workforce as quickly as possible and utilizing those skills that they have learned in the military. Because we know our veterans are very highly trained and have great skills, and so we want to make sure that we're using that to have them transition into the workforce as quickly as possible.
Thank you. State Rep. Alvarado.
Thank you. Serving on the Committee of Higher Ed, I made sure that we kept the legislation intact, the Hazelwood Act. That came before our committee, and there were attempts to undo the Hazelwood Act. The Hazelwood Act makes sure that veterans have the opportunity to receive an education, a college degree. Not only the veterans, but their families have access to that. And serving as the Committee on Urban Affairs, serving as the chair of the committee, I worked on legislation to making sure that we tackled issues dealing with housing for veterans. So many of our veterans are homeless. Tackling issues with Search, one of the leading nonprofits. I've gone out under the underpasses along 45 and have met many veterans who are in need of housing, who are in need of mental care. This legislative session, we put more money, $400 million in mental health care, and I'm encouraged that veterans will be able to access this care and not be on the streets and not be homeless.
Thank you so much. This next question is for State Rep. Ana Hernandez. The Houston Chronicle recently endorsed State Rep. Carol Alvarado, saying although you both have similar views, you have not gained the leadership positions Alvarado has. So what is your response to this article?
Thank you for that question. We had this discussion during the screening that I'm proud of the record for the last 13 years of sponsoring legislation driven by our community. We spend a lot of time with our constituents, with community organizations, to draft legislation that addresses their needs. And it's not a title or a position that you need, or to negotiate that position that you have been elected for a leadership position if it compromises the values that you've been elected to represent your constituents' best interest. And so I'm proud of our record of being able to deliver to our constituents of issues that are important to them, and have been reelected session after session, and working closely with them to continue to build our agenda for next session. And so I disagree that over the 13 years, because I haven't been placed in a leadership position under a Republican leadership, mind you, we have not been in a Democratic majority. It's been in a Republican leadership. To have to compromise and negotiate to be in a leadership position, I will not do that. I will represent the best interest of my constituents.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to rebut that.
State Rep. Alvarado, you can rebuttal.
I think if you look at our voting record, it's pretty much the same. We pretty much vote on the same issues the same way. I think you can do both. When you have to get 76 votes to pass something, you have to work across the aisle. And I'm proud of the trust and the confidence that a moderate Republican like Joe Strauss placed in me, not to chair one committee, but two committees, to serve on calendars, one of the more influential committees, There are great Democrats like Symphonia Thompson, the dean of our House, Democrats like Garnett Coleman, a champion for health care, that also chair a committee. So I would say, by mentioning the word compromise your values, I've never done that. I don't forget where I come from. I live in my community. I actually live in this district.
Yes, you have the right to answer to that, Mr. Representative Hernandez.
This moderate Republican speaker that has appointed her chair is the same one that pushed SB 4. You tell me if that's moderate. Tell me if our community feels like that is a moderate leadership there, that has pushed SB 4 and put our communities living in fear, pushed them back into the shadows. And I'm glad that you mentioned Symphonia Thompson and Garnett Coleman, because I am proud to have their endorsement for my candidacy for Senate District 6.
And I voted against Senate Bill 4.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on. We want to have another student. Please come forward. State your name once again, and also state your question.
How's it going? My name is Eric Dungute. I'm a recent transfer to this school, and my question is about veterans. Currently, we have Bill 269, which is supposed to help veterans transfer credits they earned while they were in the military to be able to have them be used for college. Right now, the way it's written, it says you have to be honorably discharged. The problem with that, if you're currently on reserve side or guard, you do not have that. And the way the school is, the way the schools are interpreting it, they're saying you don't qualify for that. And I just want to know what you guys will do to make sure that is fixed, and if that is something you're looking to do.
All right, Maya, you can take this one.
So thank you so much for the thoughtful question. First and foremost, going back to equity. You tell me that this bill exists, but then puts a stipulation to not allow certain people the same access. I have a problem with it. That does not remotely sound equitable. So one, we mentioned the amount of veterans that are in this district and that have continued to be in this district. And there's aspects that situations where getting to transfer credits from the military to school can also help impact how quick they will get into the job force depending on the direction they're going. This needs to be equitable. This needs to put people first, and that aspect of it needs to be changed. It doesn't need something that you must have an honorable discharge, but then I'm gonna take a group out of it because there's something that you haven't yet achieved to get that, when you can just say across the board, all these individuals can have it. That just seems like a way to prevent others from gaining that access sooner rather than later. And I think it should be changed.
Thank you.
State Representative Alvarado, would you like to answer to that question too?
I would agree. I mean, just like we've said in the last discussions, I think we need to do everything that we can to make sure that veterans have access, whether it's to education, it's to housing, it's to rehabilitation for drug or alcohol abuse, or it's just for access to health care. And I think this bill can be uplifting to veterans, and I will wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
State Rep. Hernandez.
Thank you very much for your question, and that is a concern for many students. When you're transferring credits or taking classes that when you go to transfer, you realize they're not going to transfer. Not only have you wasted your time, but you have wasted your money in taking and paying for that course, and that is wrong, and we need to make sure that we streamline that transition process. I've done that with other fields as well, and it's important that we get students in to these workforce training programs and out and prepared and into the workforce as quickly as possible with as little student debt as possible. And so I am supportive of measures like these, and also expanding that, as I mentioned, through our Texas Women Veterans programs. We're looking at those kind of policies, recommendations as they're out in the field and talking to individuals and finding, hearing those stories firsthand about what challenges our veterans are facing. So I'm completely committed to helping in that transition and in the transfer of credits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is for State Representative Carol Alvarado. As a native Houstonian who grew up in Houston's East End, you deal with the hardship of living in a neglected neighborhood. As a Texas state senator, what would you do to be sure low-income neighborhoods are not neglected?
I'm a proud product of the Houston's East End community, and it's not just the East End community that I would be a voice for, but all communities, the near north side, Pasadena, Baytown, Galena Park, Jacinto City. We have to make sure that people have a quality education, and growing up being a product of public schools, I know the importance of that, making sure that we have access to health care, that we have clean air to breathe, and we have affordable housing. We are becoming a state where we are seeing a housing segregation. We have passed up opportunities to bring in affordable housing because in some communities, they don't want certain types of development. And I'm proud of my track record as the chair of Urban Affairs for making sure that we make it more equitable so that people can develop affordable housing. And organizations like New Hope can bring in developments for single-room occupancies to give housing opportunities where people are earning $10,000 to $12,000 a year. These are the very lowest income who are trying to make ends meet. I will also work to make sure that we continue to have a growing economy, but also make sure that we don't leave people behind and that we work to pass a livable wage.
Thank you so much, State Representative. Next question that we have. An estimated 52% of the population in Texas Senate District 6 work in low-paying or risky jobs, such as construction or education. As of May 2018, the unemployment rate in Harris County is 4.3%. What are your plans to strengthen the economy as well as create higher-paying jobs? Maya, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I'll definitely take it. So 52% low-paying jobs. So I think there's a couple things that kind of run through my head when I think through that. One, I've been in that group, and the thing that pulled me out of that group was a higher-paying job. Now, what I had to do to get that higher-paying job is I had to increase my education, which definitely cost a whole lot more debt, as well as go through different mentorship programs with individuals to connect me to the right places. So on one aspect, I can look at this and go, the jobs they have, it's time to fight for a livable wage. I do agree with that. On the other hand, I know that the livable wage is a domino effect, and that's going to cause just as much to be addressed as the fact that there's not a livable wage. The other thing that it makes me think of is going back to those strategic partnerships. So there's an aspect where working with our community centers, working to prepare people for the workforce, to put them in better paying jobs. Also, this kind of makes me think of gentrification. I feel like that's kind of how we're currently addressing the situation, but that displaces people. So I want to make sure I invest in such a way where we're being able to drive our economy, but we're not tipping a scale with gentrification that displaces individuals and gives equity to all. And so yes, there's educational aspects, there's workshop and workforce aspects to this, but more than anything, we need to make sure that they have the resources and the tools to better their lives, whether it's through education or the workforce. And that starts with investing in the communities.
Thank you so much.
State Representative Hernandez.
As a single working mother, I understand the struggles of many families, especially single parents, in making ends meet and providing for their families. And it is impossible to support a family on a minimum wage job. Add on that any other issues, unforeseen issues. If your child gets sick and you have to take time off to take them to the doctor, the hours that you miss or the risk that you take of losing your job. And no family should have to live in that situation. We want to make sure that we have workforce programs that help these individuals that want to enter another field to be able to do so. To start that in the high school level through our workforce pipeline. There are many jobs around the Port of Houston area that are good paying jobs, that working with the industry and having those certifications when they graduate from high school, they can enter a good paying job. Or continue on to the community college and have another year or two and have the certification. Those are the type of programs that we need in our community to give individuals the tools that they need to be able to provide for their families.
Thank you. Before we move on to student questions, State Rep Alvarado, would you like to answer this one as well?
I think that starting with making a livable wage, we have too many people that are not earning a decent income, a decent salary. And we also have to make sure that we are doing everything that we can so that students have access. They have access to options that we are building on when we passed House Bill 5, but that we push some of the things, especially in the East End, where we are completely surrounded by a lot of the chemical and refining industry, the STEM programs in our schools, to make sure that kids have those options and those opportunities to be able to fill the skills gap that most of our businesses are facing. I think that, coupled with making sure that we have a livable wage, can uplift our community and make sure that everybody has access to home ownership as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We don't want to forget about the students, so we have another student with a question. So please, come on down, state your name, and tell us your question.
Yes, good evening. My name is Ramiro Ojeda, and my question is, human trafficking is a nationwide issue, but it's particularly problematic in our city and state. If elected, how would you assist in stopping human trafficking or human smuggling in our state and in Houston?
Maya, would you like to take this one?
Definitely. So, human trafficking. So, when I think about human trafficking and I think about some of the predictors around it, I just use common sense. So, for instance, people of color, lower socioeconomic, maybe more women than men. So, there's an aspect where being able to walk with the community and mitigate those things is very, very important. So when we go back to what was just said about livable wage, and when we go back to what was just said about the skills gap, if individuals are making more money, that in and of itself will begin to help mitigate that. So there's an aspect where, yeah, from a crime standpoint, yes, we're gonna continue to enforce laws and fine evildoers and so forth and so on. But from an aspect of an at-risk standpoint, no access to health care, low socioeconomic, not a livable wages, all these things, you keep just making a tick system, it makes it a higher probability that that's gonna happen in certain communities. And so one of the ways to address human trafficking in those communities is to education, is to workforce, is to skills gap. You must give a livable wage, and you must ensure that people are able to not only increase their lives and live happier lives, but just by doing that will mitigate what human trafficking does in our society. Thank you.
Thank you. State Representative Hernandez.
Combating human trafficking has been one of my priorities as a legislator in authoring and introducing and passing legislation to combat human trafficking. We see in our neighborhoods, you see the shopping centers that have the black windows with the neon lights, say massage. And they're being portrayed as a massage place. But we know what's going on in there. We know there are other issues going on. So we've worked through the civil code in drafting and passing legislation to go after those places that we know is just a front for human trafficking, and have given the tools to our city attorney, our county attorney, to go in and close those places under a nuisance claim. We've also worked on legislation with our cantinas and making sure that TABC and the police department and the attorney's office are working together to shut those down. That's legislation through the civil code. And we're also piercing the corporate veil. And that's a legal term for saying we're going to go after the bad actors. You're not going to be able to hide behind a shell corporation saying you weren't involved in this activity. If you are involved in that activity, we were going to go after you as an individual for being one of the individuals responsible for this human trafficking.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. State Rep Alvarado.
Thank you. Houston has been unfortunately recognized as a haven, as an attraction for human trafficking, and you have to wonder why. What is attracting human trafficking to Houston? I think that we have to make sure that we are fully funding our law enforcement on the ground, whether it's our sheriffs, it's our police departments, not imposing unfunded mandates, but giving them the tools, making sure that our state agencies like TABC, that is going to be up for sunset review, has the sufficient number of inspectors and enforcement people to crack down on this. I've worked on legislation on this topic, and I have been to some of the businesses with TABC in my years of public service, some not too far from here, where we know that they are employing people through human trafficking, and we have to do everything that we crack down on them and stop it before it imposes very dangerous and dire situations for some of our most vulnerable population.
Thank you so much, State Rep. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have another student. You would like to come up to the podium, please? And once again, say your name and state your question.
Hi, my name is Fierro. I'm a student here at the University of Houston downtown. I too will be part of the school's graduating class this winter.
Congrats.
My question is...
We can clap. Woo.
Yeah,
Congratulations. That's a big accomplishment.
My question is, what message do each of you have for young women aspiring to be leaders in their communities?
Stay Hernandez.
Keep fighting, don't give up. I mean, as I mentioned, as a former undocumented immigrant, the odds have always been against me, but you keep fighting and you keep pushing, and don't take no for an answer. And as a woman, sometimes the expectation is higher of you, for you to be better prepared. Well, you do it. You work harder and you show up prepared every single day, and don't get discouraged. And it's to say it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to be able to succeed. You know, I'm not standing here because I did things on my own. I mean, people have opened doors for me. As I mentioned, it was the internship opportunity that had opened the door for me to continue in state government, and mentors around me that have helped me. And that's why I believe that in the position that I am now, it's my responsibility to help others as well along the way. You don't get there, make it, and forget about where you came. You continue helping those that are coming behind you, continue to lift everyone up, because together that's how we empower each other to work together as a community. So thank you very much for what you're doing, your leadership, and best of luck to you after graduation.
Maya.
So I love the question. And so I am a byproduct of everyone who's gone before me. And I am so thankful for the family I was raised in, the community church I've had, as well as how important education's been throughout my life. I am the first in my family to graduate college with an undergrad and with a master's. And so what I want to say to this question is, yes, you want to go far, grab people. But more than anything, across the intersections of your life, I'm a proud African-American bisexual woman. And so there's an aspect where there's going to be obstacles, but you need grit and you need to be tenacious. And you need to keep fighting, and you need to keep moving forward and make sure you always pay it back and you always pay it forward. And there's nothing you can't do, and you are going to be the only person that ever stops you from doing something. So grab those who you trust most, who are running just as fast as you, and don't look back. Congratulations.
Step Rep Alvarado.
I think you're doing one of the first things that I would advise you to do, and that is getting an education, empowering yourself, giving yourself the tools to move on and to do good things for yourself. Find a career that you enjoy and a passion that you have. I'm proud of mentoring many young women, many young Latinas throughout the East End and throughout our communities across Houston, being involved with Latinas on the Rise, and also being a voice for young women to make sure that they have the power to speak for themselves and that they also have the right to make decisions for themselves, especially when it comes to their health. Get involved with organizations that empower women and that give you the resources that you need to grow, to mature, and also to give back. Give back to the community by being involved, maybe a career in public service, but just know that you are important. You have every right and every ability to be the best that you can be. Women are growing in terms of the number of entrepreneurships.
That was your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, but great advice, and congratulations to you as well.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, we have to say
That's
adios, amigos, but before we have some closing statements.
We do, and we already did the coin flips, just so everyone is aware. And first up is Mia Mundy. You have about 2 minutes to give your closing statement.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate the University of Houston downtown having us out, as well as ABC and Univision. I will tell you, entering this race with 4 weeks at the helm, it has been quite a learning experience, but it has been a joy. The only thing I would add to the young lady's question, and I've gotten this a lot throughout this race, take risks. You're going to be asked, why you? You're going to be asked, why now? You're going to be asked, what makes you think you can stand among giants? And to that, I want to say simply this: you. You are the reason you take the risk. You are the reason now. And you are the reason you can stand among giants. And what's at risk is the service of others, marginalized voices, 30% numbers of poverty, 52% numbers of this, 24,000 veterans of that, 80, like I continue to hear all these numbers, and this has been the district. We are thriving as a state, but we are failing as a district. And it is important to me, if you put me in the place to be your senator, that we make sure that there's equity across the board and that we're all succeeding in this district. And so what I say to everyone here tonight is, I'm so proud of you for coming out. I'm so proud of you for doing your civic duty. And do not let my inexperience fool you. I am passionate, and I will serve the people at SD6, and I will make sure that marginalized voices have a seat at the table and that we move this district forward across education and our workforce and our healthcare. Thank you so much.
Now is the turn of State Representative Ana Hernandez.
Thank you. I also want to thank you for taking time to be with us this evening and those that are watching us via live stream. And I'm proud of our work as a state representative over the past 13 years. And I think it's our life experiences that shape our perspective and that fuel our passion. And it's my experience as a legislator for 13 years, and I've been in state government for over 20 years since it started as an intern, as an immigrant, as a lawyer, and as a mother of a 6-year-old boy, that shaped my perspective and fueled my passion to continue to fight for others. I came to this country when I was a baby. We lived undocumented for about 8 years until the Immigration Reform and Control Act. My family lived in fear. I saw my parents struggle to achieve the American dream, but I saw what quality public education can do to transition, to transform a child's life. And I'm grateful for those teachers, those mentors that encouraged me to go on to college, to be the first in my family to go on to college, then go on to law school. So many doors that have been opened for me because of the work that other people have done. And I understand that that is my obligation as a public servant to make sure that all families have that opportunity. And that starts with education and making sure that every single family, regardless of where they live, that child, young child, has access to full-day pre-K. And not only those children whose parents can afford to it, that every single child, no matter where they live, have the same resources and tools in their schools within the same district, and make sure that they're prepared to go on to college and to enter the workforce. That's the core of making a strong community and making sure that our families are healthy by having access to health care. Those are very basic principles of making sure that we give our community the tools that they need so everyone can succeed. And that's what I bring to the table, that experience, that life experience, legislative experience, to continue to fight for my community and continue that fight in the Texas Senate.
Thank you. State Representative Carol Alvarado, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you again for the opportunity. As a young girl growing up in Manchester, the East End, the heart of Senate District 6, I saw firsthand the challenges that our community faced, the need for public education, equality education, the lack of access to adequate health care, and the need to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be at the table. I'm not asking for your vote because of where I was born. I'm not asking for your vote because I'm a woman or I'm a Latina. I want to earn your vote because of what I have done and continue to do in our community. I want to make sure that children have every opportunity to reach their full potential. The challenges that I described motivated me as a young girl, whether it was making sure that we got a bridge built in a community where I grew up that was trapped in by trains, or passing the smoking ban on the Houston City Council and being a fighter for improving our air quality, for being a promoter and passing bills, landmark legislation of criminal justice reform, banning e-cigarettes for the use and consumption by minors. I also realize that promises don't equate to much if you don't have the results to back them up. And it is because of these accomplishments and these results that I've earned the support of organizations like Planned Parenthood, like labor organizations, like the Houston Chronicle and the Houston GLBT Caucus. I also realize that in my 15 years of public service, being elected isn't about me. It's about the work that we do on behalf of the community. I ask for your vote, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you so much once again to all 3 of you.
Thank you to all 3 candidates and to our audience here at UHD for joining us in what has been a lively and informative debate.
That's right, and a friendly reminder to everyone out there that early voting is going on right now as we speak, so make sure you cast your ballot, and Election Day is December the 11th, so don't forget about that. And again, great questions. Thank you so much for all three of you for being here, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
To all of you who are watching through the internet, please share this broadcasting, share with your friends on your social media. Thank you. Good night.